My wife took everything after cheating. She didn't know I had one last card to play.
The diamond ring ID worked overtime for months to afford, glinted coldly on her finger as she moved efficiently around what had once been our shared bedroom. So that is it? My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. 15 years together, and you were just walking out. Vanessa barely looked up, her perfectly manicured nails snapping the suitcase shut. At 43, she was still stunning, her blonde hair freshly highlighted, her figure maintained by the personal trainer I paid for. Thomas, let us not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. Her tone was businesslike, as if she were concluding a minor transaction rather than destroying our marriage. We both know this hasn't been working for a long time. And Richard? I asked, my throat tight. My business partner? How long has that been going on? A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by that mask of indifference I'd grown to recognize over the years. Does it matter? Richard appreciates me. He sees my value. And I didn't The question hung in the air between us. Vanessa finally turned to face me, something like pity in her eyes. You were useful, Thomas, a good stepping stone. But let us be honest, you were never really enough. The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. 15 years of supporting her dreams, of working 60-hour weeks to give her the lifestyle she craved, of believing we were building something together, all reduced to being a stepping stone. I've had my lawyer prepare everything, she continued, pulling a stack of documents from her purse. The house transfers to me. It is only fair since you were always working anyway. The car too. Oh, and I am taking Bailey. Bailey? I felt my chest tighten. You're retaking our dog. He is a purebred golden retriever, Thomas. He is worth money. She shrugged. Besides, I've already registered him in my name. I stared at her, searching for any trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The woman who had cried happy tears when I'd surprised her with Bailey as a puppy. The woman who had once sworn that our love was the most important thing in her life. She was gone. Maybe she had never really existed. You deserve nothing, she said, sliding the papers across the kitchen counter toward me. Sign these and we can both move on with our lives. I took the papers, scanning the first page. She had indeed taken everything, the house I'd renovated with my own hands, the car I'd saved for years to buy, even Bailey. 15 years of my life erased with a signature. And then, despite everything, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't even angry. It was the smile of someone who had seen this coming long before today. Vanessa faltered for the first time. What in me so funny? Nothing, I said quietly, still smiling. Nothing at all. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Vanessa had always been good at reading people. It was what made her such a formidable sales director, but my smile clearly unsettled her. Just sign the papers, Thomas. Don't make this difficult. I set the documents down on the counter, my smile never wavering. You know what? Keep it all. The house, the car, even Bailey. What game are you playing? Her voice had an edge now. No game, I replied, reaching for my jacket. You were right. It is time we both moved on. As I headed for the door, I could feel her eyes boring into my back, confusion and wariness replacing her earlier confidence. Thomas, she called after me. What did you do? So I paused at the doorway, turning back one last time to the woman who thought she had taken everything from me. You'll find out soon enough, I said softly. And then I walked out, leaving her standing alone in the house she thought was now hers, surrounded by the spoils of her betrayal. The rain pounded against my windshield as I drove aimlessly through the streets of our town. Our town. The thought made me laugh bitterly. Nothing had been ours for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The signs had been there for months, perhaps even years. Late-night phone calls that she took in another room. Business trips that mysteriously extended. The new clothes, the expensive perfume I hadn't bought her, the growing disdain in her eyes whenever I talked about our future. I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel on the edge of town, not the kind of place Vanessa would ever deign to visit, which made it perfect for tonight. As I checked in under a false name, I thought back to the moment everything had changed. It was 3 months ago. Vanessa had forgotten her phone when she left for a weekend conference. She'd been gone barely an hour when it buzzed with a message from Richard. "Can't wait to have you all to myself this weekend. No interruptions." The phone almost slipped from my numb fingers. Richard, my business partner, the man who had been best man at our wedding, the man I'd helped through his divorce 5 years earlier. I wanted to confront her immediately, to call her and scream, to drive to Richard Ayres' house and punch him in the face. Instead, I took a deep breath and started paying attention. Really paying attention. And the evidence was everywhere. Credit card statements showing hotel charges in our own city on days she was supposedly at the office. Receipts for gifts I'd never seen. Lingerie hidden in the back of her drawer, items she'd never worn for me. I remembered how different Vanessa had been when we first met. 28 years old, working as a receptionist at the architecture firm where I'd just been promoted to associate. She'd had dreams then. Simple ones. A small house with a garden. Maybe children someday. Weekend trips to the coast. But as my career advanced and our income grew, her dreams changed. The modest house we bought became an embarrassment. The simple dinners out weren't good enough anymore. She started mentioning her friends' vacations in Europe, their luxury cars, their designer clothes. I worked harder, took on more projects, started my own firm with Richard, believing that if I could just give her the lifestyle she wanted, she'd be happy again. The warm, loving woman I'd married would return. Instead, the more I gave, the more she wanted, and the more contempt she seemed to have for me and the work that provided it all. The rain beat a steady rhythm on the motel roof as I stretched out on the lumpy bed. My phone buzzed. 16 missed calls from Vanessa. I smiled grimly and switched it off. She'd be piecing it together now, frantically trying to figure out what I'd meant. What I knew, what I'd done. I closed my eyes, remembering the day 2 months ago when I'd finally accepted the truth. I'd come home early, a surprise reservation at her favorite restaurant planned for our anniversary. Instead, I was the one surprised when I heard noises from upstairs. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, listening to my wife and my business partner in our bed. I could have confronted them then. Instead, I quietly left and drove around for hours, making a decision that would change everything. The next day, I called Mark Stevens, the best divorce attorney in 3 counties. I laid out everything I knew and suspected. "She's planning to take you for everything," Mark warned after hearing my story. "Women like your wife, they don't just leave. They make sure they win first." "I know," I said quietly. "So, what do we do?" Mark leaned forward. "We need to be smarter, more patient. Can you pretend everything's normal while we prepare?" I nodded, though my stomach turned at the thought. "Then here is what we're going to do." I smiled again in the darkness of the motel room, thinking of the documents Vanessa had so confidently pushed across the counter today. She thought she had orchestrated the perfect exit, that she'd walk away with everything while I stood helpless. She had no idea that I'd seen the trap coming and set one of my own. Tomorrow she would discover exactly what she had signed away 3 months ago. And for the first time in years, I felt myself genuinely looking forward to the morning. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. I showered in the motel's lukewarm water, the reality of my situation settling over me like the steam that fogged the bathroom mirror. By now, Vanessa would be wondering why I hadn't returned her calls. Maybe she'd even started to worry. Not about me, but about her perfect plan. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. Mark would be calling her in exactly 30 minutes. As I dressed, I thought about the meticulous preparation of the past 3 months. While Vanessa thought I was oblivious, too trusting, too passive, I had been documenting everything. The first step had been financial. I'd hired a forensic accountant to trace our assets, revealing patterns I'd never noticed before. How money flowed from our joint accounts to her personal one. Expensive gifts purchased for her clients that never appeared in any business records. Weekend trips that aligned perfectly with Richard E.'s absences from the office. "Your wife has been planning this for at least a year," the accountant told me, showing me spreadsheets highlighting suspicious transactions. "She has been moving assets, establishing her own financial identity separate from yours." I then discovered she'd been meeting with divorce attorneys 6 months ago. While still telling me she loved me, while still accepting the anniversary gift I'd saved up for months to buy her. The most painful revelation was finding her handwritten exit strategy hidden in her desk drawer, a detailed list of what she wanted to take, including items with sentimental value to me but little monetary worth. She decalculated everything down to the dog, not because she loved Bailey, but because she knew how much I did. Marquez's strategy had been brilliant in its simplicity. "She thinks you are a fool," he said bluntly. "We'll use that against her." Together, we crafted a document that appeared to be related to a new investment property, something Vanessa wouldn't question, since real estate had been our financial focus for years. But hidden within the dense legal text was a post-nuptial agreement with very specific terms regarding infidelity and asset division. "Will she even sign it?" I'd asked Mark doubtfully. He smiled grimly. "People only read what they want to see. If she thinks it is just another investment, she'll sign." And she had. 3 months ago, without even skimming the document, she'd signed while scrolling through her phone, impatient to get to her book club, which I now knew was code for meeting Richard. The second part of the plan involved Richard. Mark hired a private investigator who compiled a damning portfolio of evidence: photos of their rendezvous, hotel receipts, text messages we'd recovered from the cloud backup of her phone. Most crucially, evidence that they'd been misappropriating company funds. As I checked out of the motel, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "She called the office 4 times already this morning. Ready for phase 2? I texted back a simple yes. The timing had to be perfect. Today, as Vanessa was trying to figure out my strange reaction, Mark would, coincidentally, call to inform her that a legal issue had arisen with the transfer of assets. He would recommend she come to his office immediately. Meanwhile, I had an appointment with Richard at 10 a.m., an appointment he believed was about a new potential client. He had no idea that I knew about the affair, nor that I'd discovered his creative accounting with our company finances. I drove to our office, my office now, feeling strangely calm. For months, I'd carried the crushing weight of betrayal, forcing myself to smile through business meetings with Richard, to kiss Vanessa goodbye each morning. The burden of pretending had been exhausting, but today the weight was lifting. Today, the truth would finally come out. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Richard's luxury car already there. The car I'd complimented him on, never realizing it had been partially paid for with money he'd siphoned from our business. I checked my watch again, 9:55 a.m. By now, Vanessa would be sitting in Mark's office, her confident smile fading as he explained exactly what she had signed. I took one deep breath, then another. Then I walked into the building, ready to face the man who thought he had stolen my life. Richard stood as I entered the conference room, his face breaking into that easy smile that had once represented friendship, but now seemed like the worst kind of betrayal. "Thomas, there you are." I was starting to worry. He extended his hand, which I briefly shook. "Everything okay? You look like you've had a rough night." I set my briefcase on the table. "You could say that." "Client troubles?" he asked, loosening his expensive tie. A gift from Vanessa, I now realized. Our company money funneled through her, coming back as presents for her lover. "No," I replied evenly. "Wife troubles, actually." A flash of panic crossed his face before he composed himself. "Oh, everything all right with you and Vanessa?" "I think you know it isn't, T." I opened my briefcase and laid out a folder. "I think you know exactly how things stand between Vanessa and me." Richard's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" My phone buzzed, a text from Mark. "Meeting with V underway, she's stunned. Proceeding as planned." I turned back to Richard. "Vanessa left me yesterday. She's taken everything, the house, the car, even the dog." Richard's expression cycled through shock, guilt, and then poorly disguised relief. "God, Thomas, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "Are you?" I slid the folder toward him. "Because it seems like you've been planning this with her for quite some time." His face drained of color as he opened the folder and saw the photographs. Him and Vanessa entering hotel rooms. Their intimate dinner dates in restaurants 2 towns over. Their secret weekend at a cabin registered in his name. "This isn't—" "I can explain," he stammered. "Please do," I said, leaning back in my chair. Explain how my business partner and my wife conspired behind my back. Explain how company funds were redirected to pay for your little rendezvous. That's ridiculous, Ian, he snapped, but his eyes darted nervously to the door. I pulled out another document, the forensic accountant S report. We both know it, S not. We both know you've been embezzling from the company for months. Richard's jaw clenched. What do you want? Money? Is that it? I laughed softly. No, Richard, I don't want your money. Then what? His voice had lost its usual confidence. I want you to understand what you've lost. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Effective immediately, I am dissolving our partnership. You can't do that, he protested. We re-equal partners. So I check your contract again, I replied calmly. Section 12, paragraph 3. In case of financial impropriety by either partner, the other can assume full control. Richard paled further, realizing the trap he walked into. The clients will never stay with just you. Actually, I've already spoken with our top 5 clients. They're aware of the situation and have chosen to remain with me. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mark. V signed dissolution agreement, she asked in shock. Coming your way. Perfect timing. The conference room door burst open and there stood Vanessa, her perfect composure shattered. Her eyes were wild, mascara smudged from what appeared to be tears of rage rather than sorrow. You tricked me, she hissed, waving a document that I recognized as the post-nuptial agreement. You made me sign this without telling me what it was. Richard looked between us, confusion evident. What is going on? What did you sign? I smiled. Vanessa signed a post-nuptial agreement 3 months ago. It clearly states that in case of infidelity, the unfaithful spouse forfeits all claims to jointly held property. You can enforce that, Vanessa spat. No court will uphold it. Actually, I replied evenly, Mark assures me it's ironclad, especially with the evidence we have gathered. Richard turned to Vanessa, realization dawning. You said this was foolproof. You said he'd never know that we walk away with everything. The look they exchanged told me everything. How they plotted. How they laughed at my expense. How they planned to build their new life with what I spent 15 years creating. It is not just the house and assets, I continued. The company is mine now too. Richard E.'s embezzlement triggered the dissolution clause in our partnership agreement. Vanessa turned to Richard, her expression hardening. You told me you covered your tracks. Richard's face flushed with anger. And you said he'd never checked the documents he signed. I watched as their united front crumbled, each turning on the other at the first sign of trouble. This was not love. It was opportunism, pure and simple. You was both lost, I said quietly. Not just material things, but everything. Integrity, reputation, trust. Vanessa stepped toward me, her voice suddenly softer. Thomas, we can talk about this. We've been together 15 years. That has to mean something. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. It did mean something, I said. To me. I gathered my papers and walked to the door, stopping briefly before I left. Oh, and Vanessa, I'll be picking up Bailey tonight. He deserves better than both of you. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and reorganization. Where I had expected to feel triumphant, I mostly felt hollow. Victory over betrayal isn't sweet. It is necessary, but bittersweet at best. Vanessa tried everything to overturn the post-nuptial agreement. First came the accusations. I had tricked her, coerced her, manipulated her. When that didn't work, she attempted to play on my emotions, calling late at night, her voice breaking as she reminded me of our early years together. Remember our first apartment? She'd asked during one such call. How we had nothing but that old futon and those mismatched dishes. We were happy then, weren't we? We had been. That was the cruelest part, knowing that what we once shared had been real, at least for me. What happened to you, Vanessa? I finally asked after her third tearful call. The line went silent for a moment. I got tired of being ordinary, she eventually replied, her voice suddenly clear of tears. I got tired of being the wife who waited at home while you built your career. You could have built something too. I would have supported you. She laughed, a brittle sound. As what? Another architect? S-wife with a cute little hobby? No thanks. That was our last conversation. The next day, her lawyer called to say she was dropping all challenges to the agreement. She would vacate the house within the week. Richard A.'s downfall was more public. Once our clients learned of his financial improprieties, word spread quickly through our tight-knit professional community. 3 days after our confrontation, the state licensing board contacted me about an ethics investigation into his conduct. I didn't celebrate when his license was suspended. I simply provided the documentation requested and focused on rebuilding what remained of the firm's reputation. Bailey was the one bright spot in those dark weeks. The day I picked him up from what had been our home, he bounded toward me with such unrestrained joy that for the first time since everything collapsed, I laughed genuinely. His loyalty was uncomplicated, his affection sincere, everything my marriage had not been. "We were starting over, buddy," I told him as we drove away from the house for the last time. I didn't to look back. I moved into a modest apartment downtown, the opposite of the sprawling suburban home Vanessa had insisted on. Each day brought small victories, client relationships preserved, projects completed, the firm slowly regaining its footing without Richard's influence. Old friendships began to resurface too. Dave and Sarah Hansen invited me for dinner, friends Vanessa had deemed not our social tier years ago. We laughed about old times, and for a few hours I remembered what genuine connection felt like. "We've missed you," Sarah said as I was leaving. "She didn't just take you from yourself, Thomas. She took you from the rest of us too." Her words stayed with me for days afterwards. Gradually I noticed other changes. I slept better. The constant tension in my shoulders eased. I rediscovered old hobbies, hiking trails Bailey loved, woodworking projects in a small workshop I rented near the apartment, novels I'd set aside years ago when Vanessa complained they took too much of my attention. 6 months after the separation, I ran into Megan Rodriguez at a client meeting, a talented landscape architect I'd worked with years earlier. We collaborated well, our professional styles complementing each other perfectly. When she suggested coffee to discuss a potential joint project, I surprised myself by accepting. "You seem different," she observed over lattes. "More present." I considered her words. "I am different, still figuring out who that is, though." She smiled. "That is the interesting part, isn't it? The figuring out." As spring turned to summer, rumors about Vanessa and Richard drifted back to me. Their relationship had soured quickly once the financial reality set in. Richard, facing professional ruin and mounting legal fees, apparently blamed Vanessa for their downfall. She, in turn, had already moved on to someone new, an older, wealthier man who could provide what Richard no longer could. I felt nothing when I heard this. No satisfaction, no resentment, not even pity, just a profound sense of distance, as if hearing about strangers from another life. The day the divorce was officially finalized, I took Bailey to the lake, a place Vanessa had always refused to visit because it was too rustic. We hiked along the shoreline, Bailey racing ahead, circling back to check on me, then dashing forward again with boundless enthusiasm. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, I sat on a weathered bench and acknowledged a simple truth. I was going to be okay. Not because I had won some victory in the divorce, but because I had finally reclaimed myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "How about dinner tomorrow? That new Thai place downtown?" I smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." For the first time in years, I was moving forward rather than just moving on. 2 years can change everything. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood in the backyard of my new home, a renovated craftsman with a generous yard where Bailey could run to his heart, ease content. The smell of coffee drifted through the open kitchen window, mingling with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of cooler days ahead. The house wasn't extravagant. It wasn't designed to impress anyone or announce my success to the world. It was simply mine, a place where every decision, from the color of the walls to the books on the shelves, reflected who I had become rather than who someone else wanted me to be. My architecture firm had not only survived but thrived. After Richard's departure, I'd refocused our work on sustainable, community-centered projects, the kind of meaningful design that had drawn me to architecture in the first place. Our reputation grew not for luxury homes, but for thoughtful spaces that served real needs. "Coffee S ready," Megan called from inside. Her landscape design business had become the perfect complement to my architectural work, our professional collaboration evolving naturally alongside our personal relationship. As I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Heads up, Vanessa A.S. back in town. Sarah saw her at Westfield Mall yesterday." I paused, waiting for the familiar twist of anxiety or resentment. It didn't to come. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if hearing about a movie character rather than someone who had once been the center of my world. "Everything okay?" Megan asked as I stepped into the kitchen, her dark hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, her eyes questioning but patient. "Vanessa S. back in town," I said, accepting the coffee she offered. Megan nodded, leaning against the counter. "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. "Nothing, really, just nothing." She smiled, understanding what I meant. In the 18 months we'd been together, Megan had never pushed me to get over the past or pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, she'd simply walked beside me, as I found my own way forward. Later that afternoon, as I finished reviewing plans for a new community center, my office phone rang. The receptionist's voice was hesitant. "Mr. Harrington, there is a Vanessa Harrington. Sorry, Vanessa Mitchell asking to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." My hand stilled over the blueprints. "Tell her I'll be out in 5 minutes." When I stepped into the reception area, Vanessa was standing by the window. She'd lost weight, and her once immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of strain, her designer clothes slightly dated, her jewelry less ostentatious. "Thomas," she said, turning to face me. Her smile was uncertain, lacking the confidence that had once been her trademark. "You look well." "Thank you. What can I do for you, Vanessa?" She glanced around the office, redesigned since her last visit, warmer and more welcoming than the sleek, impersonal space she and Richard had preferred. "Could we talk privately?" I hesitated, then nodded toward my office. Once inside, she didn't sit, but wandered around the room, picking up a framed photo of Bailey and me on a hiking trail. "I heard your business is doing well," she said finally. "The Carson Community Center project got a lot of attention." "It did," I replied simply. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" She set down the photo and faced me directly. "Richard S. gone. Left the state after the licensing board ruling. His new business failed." I waited, sensing there was more. "Gerald, my after Richard, he wasn't at what I thought." She twisted the unfamiliar ring on her right hand. "The divorce was finalized last month." "I am sorry to hear that." And surprisingly, I meant it. Not because I still cared for her, but because I wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone. "I've been thinking about us, Thomas, about what we had." There it was. I had sometimes wondered what I would feel if this moment ever came. Vindication, perhaps, or the satisfaction of rejecting her as she had rejected me. Instead, I felt only compassion, tinged with the clarity of distance. "We had 15 years, I acknowledged. "Some of it was real, but it's done, Vanessa." "Is it?" she asked softly. "We built a life together once. We could—" "No." The word was gentle but firm. "We can, T." Her composure faltered. "Because of her? Your new designer girlfriend." "Because of me," I corrected. "I am not the same person you left, Vanessa. I don't want the same things anymore." She looked around the office again, her gaze lingering on the community center blueprints, the framed photo of Megan and me at an award ceremony, the evidence of a life rebuilt without her. "I made a mistake," she finally said, her voice small. "We both did," I replied. "Mine was forgetting who I was. Yours was thinking that what you took defined my worth." The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that never would. "I should go," she said eventually. I walked her to the door, where she paused one last time. "Are you happy, Thomas?" The question surprised me with its sincerity. I thought about my home, my work, Bailey, Megan, the friends who had returned to my life, the sense of purpose I'd rediscovered. Yes, I answered truthfully, I am. She nodded, a flash of genuine regret crossing her face. Good. You deserve to be. As I watched her walk away, I realized something important. The greatest victory wasn't tea in the legal maneuvering or the assets preserved. It wasn't but even in moving on with Megan, though that relationship had brought unexpected joy to my life. The real triumph was in rediscovering myself, the man who had been buried beneath years of compromise and disappointment. The man who, when stripped of everything he thought defined him, found something more valuable in what remained. That evening, as Megan and I walked Bailey along the river trail, our conversation flowing easily between work ideas and weekend plans, I felt a profound gratitude for the betrayal that had ultimately set me free. "What are you thinking about?" Megan asked, noticing my smile. I squeezed her hand gently. "Just that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters." She nodded, understanding as she always did. "And what matters to you, Thomas Harrington?" The answer came without hesitation, simple and true, yet just this,